Hello again, YouTubers. The T-maxx is back for probably the last review I'm going to do to it until I get a 4-channel receiver and a remote start. I've done everything else to it, put a metal gear servos for the throttle, brakes, and the steering. The steering receiver is a Servos SC0251 Metal Gear, and the throttle and brake servo is a high-tech ultra torque HS645 Metal Gear. So they're both Metal Gear. I cut holes. They don't say in the manual, but when you have a nitro car and pretty much the entire chassis is covered, you need to cut holes in the body for air circulation because these engines do get hot, especially the 3.3. This is the 3.3R motor. I've had probably about 1.5 gallons ran through it. 4 glow plugs. 2 of them were actually my fault because I ran it a little too lean. I do have the reverse on it now. That's what this right here is, a little link. I have the Venom 1600 milliamp hour hump pack, so no longer running AA's. I've been doing regular maintenance on it. I've actually found a lot of people say that theirs run best with a high-speed needle at 3.5 turns, but I actually found that about 4 1/8 makes it run cool and also gives you plenty of power. I get wheelies easy with half throttle, and you can even tell by my rear wheels that it does wheelies quite often. The Metal Gear servos really help out a lot. They give a lot more torque for braking. For steering, I did not want to have to move the... This is basically a transceiver because this is the 49077-1 model with telemetry built in. The one complaint I have with that is when it's sitting at a dead stop and it's idling at about 7,000 RPM, it's saying that it's doing 9 to 10 miles per hour. And I don't know how to zero that out. And we'll go over that in a second. It comes with a the Traxxas 3-channel TQI transmitter. And I actually have my multi-function knob set to the amount of brake because I have it so if I turn it all the way up, it will completely lock up all 4 tires. The current tires I'm running on it are actually E-revo tires. I believe they're E-revo tires. I know they're Talons, 6.8-inch Talons. Because I run mine on the street a lot. And running on the street and off-road, these, compared to the stock tires, these don't have as much tread when it comes to the street, and they have more of a crown on them. Well, the Revo tires are flatter. They have a more flat profile, and the sidewall thickness is a little thinner. Off-road, that's not good because you can possibly crack a rim, but if I go off-road, I always go with these tires, especially if I'm going extreme off-road. There's really not much to say except it's been a beauty. I have not had a single problem with it. The only problem I had was when I got this the reverse kit. The stock servo was bound from the factory, so I had to call Traxxas and they immediately sent out a new servo, but I was able to get the the servo that came with it to work intermittently. But having reverse really does help especially if you get stuck in a situation and you don't have to walk over to it. All you gotta do is flip this red switch down and you're in reverse. We'll go over to the telemetry in a second and everything that it can do, because since I've had this about 2 months now, so I've been able to go over everything. Like I said, it has a transceiver here, not just a receiver. It has a transceiver because this not only sends information to the truck, but the truck sends information back to the receiver, and then from the Traxxas Link to a phone or a tablet. I mainly use my phone, but this time I'm gonna use my tablet so it can be seen. I don't have any major wear issues. My suspension is still very tight. I have not snapped a single axle, even though I have the slipper clutch pretty much completely tightened down. So if I ever want to pull a wheelie, I mean, it usually runs about 240, 250 degrees. But if I do back-to-back speed runs, it gets up to about 300. The highest I've had is 320, no problem. Higher than that, you're gonna lose a glow plug. That's what happened twice. I'll just show what the servos can do real quick. They're a lot faster, more power, and you can see the reverse. It actually pushes and pulls that little link, and the steering is a lot faster. Because doing the dual servo steering was not an option for me. When I'm off-road and I'm moving, it has plenty of power, especially with a Servos extreme high torque servo. Hell, it was a $45 Metal Gear servo, and I got it for cheap because my hobby dealer it gives me deals. But the brake, I mean, you can actually see how much the little silicone piece, you can see how much it actually squishes it, because this servo has so much torque and it absolutely locks up the tires. I can't push it forward. So, absolutely loving that. I love the fact that now I no longer have to take the 2 screws out, take the double A's out, recharge them, put them back in, and even then I was only getting 5.5 volts. Well, with a Venom pack I'm getting a steady 7 volts, so I'm getting more power. So it's getting more power to the servos, so they have they're faster and have more torque. Basically, more power out of the battery makes everything work better. More speed, torque, all that stuff. And like I said, these aren't the stock wheels. These are actually some wheels I got from a buddy. Getting to that's basically it. I absolutely love it. I don't understand why someone would go to a E-revo 3.3, because it actually has a plastic chassis. You can actually see this has a blue anodized, about an 1/8 inch, little over an 1/8 inch thick aluminum chassis. It's a little dirty at the moment. I ran it this morning, but I've had no major problems, none. I've rebuilt certain parts on it as things have gone out. The stock A-arms, a lot of people say they bend too easy. I've had no problem with those. They don't bend too easy, but I'd rather them bend than snap. I'm rebuilding one for a guy right now, and he actually has RPM A-arms in the rear. I don't like those because it only has 3 different points to adjust for the shocks. Eventually I am going to I'm going to upgrade to a probably a Spectrum transmitter that has a transceiver. so I can still have all my telemetry, but it'll be on a screen on the receiver instead of having to not only hold this with my phone. Usually I'm having to hold this like this and control like this so I can watch my dashboard, my speed, my RPMs, my temp, my voltage, and all things like that. But it's been an absolute dream. But getting back to the E-revo 3.3, it has a plastic chassis. I have seen numerous videos where people have hit jumps and the chassis snaps in half. You don't have to worry about that with this. There's 8 screws holding each one of the entire front sections in place, and each screw is 10 millimeters long, so a full centimeter long. That may not sound long, but for what this is, that's plenty long enough. Like I said, I have my high-speed needle screw set to 4 1/8 turn out. Keeps it cool, but still keeps plenty of power. One problem I did have was the stock resonator bar that keeps it in place broke. So I just took an Allen wrench and I bent it. Not only is it sturdier, that's pretty much it. It's sturdier. It doesn't allow the resonator to move. It just locks everything in place. Another problem I did have, which I've been told by quite a few people now to watch, is the motor mount screws will come loose, and you will lose them if you are not watching them and you don't watch them closely. I'm checking those right now. I also did there's springs between the brake pads, so when I get off the brakes, one of the things that happens with this is when you get off the brakes, the pads don't separate from the disc. So basically for a second, until they completely separate from the disc, you have a drag brake. I've kept the air filter clean like you're supposed to. Every 1 hour you clean the outer element, and every 4 hours of runtime you clean the inner element. But they do send you everything to do that, except one thing they were supposed to give me but they didn't, was air filter oil. But I've actually found K&N air filter oil works perfect. It actually works better than RC air filter oil. Great. A lot of people upgrade their air filter to a high flow. I've had no problem with this. I always have plenty of flow, plenty of power. The one thing I am going to do is set my shift point so it shifts a little later, because it does shift a little early. That is one thing I will recommend to most people. Once you break it in, set your shift point to shift a little later, because especially when you're breaking it in, it's not supposed to shift. Well, the last stage of the break-in, you're supposed to give it full throttle for, I believe, 3 to 5 seconds. I can't remember. It's been a long time. But I have to break in this other guy's that I'm rebuilding his chassis. I took everything off and everything's back on now. I've had no problem with Easy Start 2. I've heard of a lot of people having problems with that. I've not had a single problem. Just take care of your one-way bearing. Make sure you take it off and clean it occasionally. It is a little bit of a bear because you do have to take the engine off to get everything off. You got to take off all the fuel lines, but just remember which way they go. And always remember, the red wire goes to the top of the motor. And these motors, if you're looking at the front of the crankshaft, they actually spin counterclockwise. So when you go to put the one-way bearing on, make sure it locks up when you're spinning it clockwise. And as you can see, I do have quite a few spacers. I am going to get some big bore shocks, aluminum big bore shocks with actual screw adjusters, but for now these are absolutely perfect. If I decide to go off-road, I just pull every one off and plenty of articulation. Better than the Summit in my opinion, because the Summit has a cantilever suspension. That is not good for rock crawling. With rock crawling, you want a suspension that is straight up and down, so when you come up to a rock, the suspension will basically get stiffened and it will push the car up against the rock, and then that will give the front tires traction to crawl up the rock. I can jump curbs with this thing easily. I'll just pull up to the curb, and I'm talking a curb about this high, but I'll pull up to the curb, give it some gas, and it'll just jump right up on top of it, no problem. But enough about the truck. Everything's working great. I absolutely love it. I think that's everything. The hump pack, battery pack, must have. The metal geared high torque and high speed servos, must have eventually. Reverse, must have. Eventually I'm going to get a remote start, but that's after I get the Spectrum transmitter. But that's it for the truck, and now we're going to actually get to the telemetry part. Now with your Traxxas, you're going to have to download the Traxxas Link. And this is what it looks like. You have your dashboard, your profiles, your select model, training mode, media, garage, drive effects, and support. Under garage, you have your model setup, which is basically your spur gear. You can change your spur gear, how many teeth it has. Mine is stock 58 with a stock 22 pinion gear. I do have a 15 tooth pinion gear, but that would actually slow it down a little, but give it more torque. Drive ratio 6.010. Oh, it's actually 6.3 inch tire, excuse me, not 6.8, but I'm actually using the, these are still 6.3 inch, no, 5.75 inch, so I need to change that, but I'll do that some other time. You got your model memory, your telemetry set up, your, you can actually do races, everything from running a track to basically 8th scale quarter mile, because this is about an 8th scale. The extended chassis is an 8th scale. It's classified as a 10th, but it is an 8th scale. Your channel setup, if you move to different servos, they have more range of motion, so you're going to have to set your endpoints. Wow, really, what else? Of course, your profiles. I have mine for my T-maxx 3.3 and everything. All you do to set this up is you turn your transmitter on, and then you go up under garage and you hit your Traxxas Link wireless module, and there's a button on the back. You press that until it starts blinking, and then you press this and it's connected. So in just a second it should turn green. You pain in the ass. I'm having a little bit of trouble with that right now, but that's all you do to connect that. I must have something else Bluetooth connected to this. Other than that, there's really not much to say. You have your drive effects, which is basically all your trims, your sensitivities. So like steering sensitivity, which is dual rate, throttle sensitivity, dual rate, steering percentage, which I actually had to change some of those because of the high-tech servo for the brake and the throttle, and the Servos servo for the steering. The dashboard, you can actually customize it. I have mine. I have my temperature set. You can actually click on it and go to the garage and you can actually edit it. And right now I have my warning label. My warning, it's supposed to be 305. But if it gets to 305 degrees, it will start beeping at me and vibrating. So I'll know immediately, okay, get off the gas, let it cool down some, and then I can start dashing again. But ever since I've opened up the high-speed needle valve and it's cooled down around here, I haven't had any problem with overheating. It's only overheated twice and nothing bad, just 2 glow plugs. And the other one is my RPM. I always watch my max RPM. Thus far, the highest I've ever gotten it was, I believe 52 miles per hour at 33,900 RPM. But that's basically it for the Traxxas Link. The telemetry, anyone who has a nitro, especially one this nice where you have so much money put into it, take care of it, do your after run. Even if all you have is WD-40, that works fine. That's what I use every time after run. WD-40, just take the glow plug. Well, first make sure all the fuel is burnt. Then take the glow plug out, put a rag down in the hole where the glow, well, not just cover the glow plug hole. Undo the air filter, squirt some open the carburetor all the way, squirt some WD-40 into the cylinder itself and into the carburetor, turn it over for 10 seconds, and while it's turning over, I do an additional shot of WD-40 to really coat everything, because a lot of people say this fuel is corrosive. No, the fuel is not corrosive. The fuel is what is called hygroscopic. That means it sucks in moisture. If you do not do the after run, like the guy that I had, he actually had a problem with it bound up. Well, it was sitting for a year and he never did any after run. Basically the moisture that got into the fuel had rusted everything up, so I had to pretty much disassemble the entire thing and WD-40 everything and get rid of all the rust, and I had to replace the sleeve and the piston. But that's basically it for this. This is my long-term review for this. I'm going to have to change my my tire size, since I'm not running the 6.3 inch right now. I'm running 5.75 inch. You can actually see the Traxxas wheels are a little taller, but that's meant, this thing's basically meant to be like a monster truck, but with independent suspension all around instead of solid axles. But as for Traxxas, I absolutely love them. I will admit they are a bit on the pricey side. This I was able to get for $535, but the Summit is $735. But that does give you lockable differentials, two-speed gearbox that you can actually choose the gearing. You can choose when it changes gearing. There's just so many different things that you can get through Traxxas. They have two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive short course trucks, electric for everything, nitro for everything. And if you ever have a problem, as long as you're registered, you call them, tell them what the problem is, they send you a new part. Initially, they were going to send me gears for the servo, but the gears were out of stock. They just sent me a brand new servo. So now all I have to do is buy some new gears for it, and I'll have an extra sub-micro servo. But absolutely great. I didn't go over the fuel tank. It's a 125 milliliter fuel tank. 125cc fuel tank. So I've actually found it gives me about a 20-minute run time, 15 to 20 minutes depending how hard you're beating on it, stuff like that. But other than that, if you have any questions or comments, like usual, hit me down in the comment section and I'll answer whatever I can. I've completely rebuilt one of these now, so I'm going to have my fiance, who's doing the camera right now, pause it so I can show the other chassis that I've completely rebuilt and cleaned up. So that's it for this one. Now let's go take a look at the other one. Here is the T-maxx chassis that I've completely rebuilt. It had mud caked on it all over. Whoever had it, and he got it from his brother. He did not take care of it. I had to completely rebuild the engine because the head was it was missing the gasket between the head and the crankcase, so the compression was absolutely insane. But I got it running, had to put a new carb on it. What else did I have to do? Yeah, I'm having to put a new steering servo on it back there. Had to clean up the resonator because it had mud caked all over it. Not only caked, but also burnt on. I'm having to replace a few bolts. But the good thing is I've got it running and the tires are spinning. Well, the axles are spinning. I'm actually using the tires off this right now, and he's going to order some actual T-maxx tires, and I'm going to keep the E-revo tires for on-road use. Slower speed because they are a smaller diameter, but better for on-road use because there's more traction. But that is he didn't have a radio for it, so that's why I'm giving him that radio. And he's paying me back by giving me a Rustler chassis and a 2.5R motor, which I already have. So I'm slowly rebuilding that up. So I'll have a Rustler with a 2.5R next, and I'll be reviewing that when I get it done. But other than that, that's it for this. Well, with this one, he's only going to have 2 channels. He wanted to go with a reverse, but all I had was a 2-channel radio, and he's just wanting to get it running. So I'm going to put some Metal Gear servos on it. Once I get the servos changed and tires and set the tow, I'll be able to give it back to him, and he'll be able to have fun with it like I have fun with mine. So, like usual, until next time, peace.